Publishing a book 2 years ago completely changed my life. I was finally able to put author on my Instagram and LinkedIn profile. What could be better? Just kidding. I remember the feeling when it was published. I was nervous. I was excited. I vividly remember sitting in that chair going, oh my goodness, it's out there. People are finally going to be able to read this book, this labor of love that I had spent years working on. And so today I've got 12 life lessons for you that I learned through that writing and publishing process, because you learn a lot when you do something like this, and I want you to have the benefits of those learnings. So whether you're writing, creating content, researching a business, these are for you. Only writers write books. So I had this goal of writing and publishing a book one day, but there was only one problem. I was writing very sporadically. I wouldn't write consistently or all the time. And eventually I realized, hey, you know what? This book isn't going to write itself. And only people that write on a consistent basis are the people that actually end up writing and publishing books. It's not really that different than if you and I sat down across from each other and I said, hey, I'm going to run a marathon. And you asked me, great, how often are you running? I'm like, well, I only run maybe 1 or 2 days a week, and preferably only if the weather is good. I don't want to run in the rain. You'd be like, well, I'm not sure if you're going to be running that marathon anytime soon. We do this with our goals though, don't we? We set goals, but we don't actually have the habits in place that are going to help us get there. So I had to put the habit in place of becoming a writer before I could realistically set the goal of saying, hey, you know what? I'm ready to write a book, and here's when I'm going to do it. Work in the gaps. Now, this was probably the best advice that I received as I was going through the process of writing my book. I was actually getting relatively close to the end, maybe 3/4 of the way through the process of writing the book, when somebody said to me, you know what, you've got to learn to write in the gaps or work in the gaps, because life is full-time job. At the time I had 2 kids, now I have 3. There's a lot going on. I had the very consistent habit of writing every day, but even that I was limited. I only had maybe 30 to 45 minutes in the morning before I could go to work. That's when it fit in my schedule. But then I was suggested to me, hey, write in the gaps, because there's always something you can work on, and there are always gaps in your day. So maybe it's a couple of 15 minutes here before you're going to have dinner, 15, 20 minutes before you head to the gym, you finish up work early, and you've got these sort of gaps in the day. Maybe you're not going to be able to sit down and get into real creative flow, but there is always things that you can be working on or researching or helping to drive your project forward. So work in the gaps. The cover matters. There is a pretty common saying that you can't sell a book by its cover. Well, my friend, that is a lie. Because way too often your book cover, the thumbnail for your video, the name of your brand is all that a customer is going to see and be able to make their decision as to whether or not they want to pick that up or interact with what it is that you've created. This is why YouTube thumbnails are so important. This is why the title of your book matters probably more than you can even imagine, because you want the opportunity for what it is that you're investing your time, bringing your gift to, and actually putting out into the world. You want that opportunity for it to have impact. So the cover matters more than you think. The thumbnail to the YouTube video matters more than you can imagine. But if no one ever picks it up, clicks play, or calls your business, then they never get the opportunity to know how you could help them. The bestseller racket. I remember when my book became a bestseller on Amazon. I was pretty excited, and to be honest, I was shocked. You see, up until that point, I had been researching some businesses that said, hey, you know what, we guarantee we'll make your book a bestseller on Amazon. For X number of dollars, your book can become a bestseller. And I almost did it. I almost paid the fee, wanting that sort of brand recognition, that validation in the marketplace. But something didn't feel right. And so even when I went with my hybrid publisher and worked with them, they had a guaranteed bestseller option that I chose not to go with. And then there I was sitting with bestseller status on Amazon, but it actually hadn't sold that many books. Sometimes there are things in life when it comes to recognition or brand status that look like they're a greater distance away than they actually are. And when it comes to recognition, if somebody offers you a shortcut, it's very rarely worth it. The zero draft. So this idea comes from Greg McKeown's book, Effortless. And this idea is that sometimes you need to step back even from a rough draft. You need to say to yourself, I'm going to write a zero draft of something that I'm working on, something that nobody's ever going to read. And this is purely just because you need to get in the practice of getting words on paper, creative ideas moving forward. Because sometimes you sit down and you're like, what am I going to write about? What am I going to create today? But when you're in the motion of already creating, when you're in the motion of already putting something out there, that's when your best ideas come. That's when the big ideas come. But you have to remove that pressure, because sometimes when you say, oh, I'm going to write a rough draft, then you assume that somebody's going to read that rough draft, and it holds you back. It stops you from creating. So start with a zero draft. Feedback. When you are just getting started in the creative process, whether that be writing or whatever it is, you often crave feedback. Be very careful at this point. Your dreams, your goals, what you're pursuing and trying to create is incredibly fragile. And sometimes showing what it is that you're creating too early to people, even people that you know or trust, if you get feedback that you're not ready for, constructive criticism that you just aren't ready for, you may get crushed. Now, their feedback might be absolutely correct. It could be really rough and need a lot of work. But a lot of times at the beginning, you just need someone to tell you, hey, you know what? You need to keep going. You don't need someone to tear it apart and tell you where you missed every punctuation and every word you spelt wrong. That comes later. And then when you do go to share your work, be very conscious of the type of feedback that you're looking for. Are you looking for someone to tear it apart and tell you all the little tiny mistakes that you might have made? Or are you just looking for someone to evaluate the ideas, the things that you're coming up with and say, hey, you know what? Am I on the right track? That's what you're looking for, because those are two very different types of feedback, and you want to make sure that you're soliciting the correct one and expecting the correct one when it comes back to you. What's the problem that you're trying to solve? I don't feel that I necessarily did the best job of this, of really identifying what's the problem that I can help people solve with this book, with this creative idea. But you have a gift and a skill set and a superpower that when you bring that to the world, that can help people solve problems. So when you can recognize that gift and skill sets you have, then you can say, hey, what problem can I solve with this gift or skill set? Then go and solve that. Who will read it? This is really a follow-up to the problem that you're trying to solve. You need to have a picture of the person or the type of person that you are looking to serve with this work. Who are you looking to serve with your book, with your video, with the business that you've got? Do you have an idea and a picture of who that person is in your mind so that you're speaking to them? You will never be ready. You're never ready to start writing your first book, and you're never ready to start creating that first video. You're never going to be ready to launch that first business. But here's the real secret. No one ever is. Are you going to come out of the gate writing a New York Times bestseller or putting a video out there that reaches millions of people? Probably not. It's really not the lottery world that we live in. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't start, because the world needs to hear from you. Ship it. Right along the lines with the fact that you will never be ready, also your project will never be perfect. You'll get to a point of diminishing returns where you've invested time into the project and it actually needs to get out into the world. Now it's time to ship it, hit publish, hit send, whatever it is that puts it out into the marketplace so that you can learn from that experience and go on and create more great things to serve more people. What can you outsource? You can't be good at every part of the process. I hired an amazing artist to work with me on the cover of the book. I worked with an editor and a hybrid publisher that helped me bring the book to life and get it out into the marketplace. Is it possible that you and I could do every step of the process? Possibly. I can't even imagine what my book cover would have looked like if I had to draw it. That's not a gift of mine. But there are people out there with incredible gifts, skills, talents, and abilities that want to bring those to your project, that want to be a part of your project and help bring it to life. Remember that your most valuable resources are your time and capacity. Sow into the areas that are your skills, your gifts, your strengths, and work with other people in their skill sets to help bring your project to life. You need a deadline. Just like coming to the end of this video, it has to have an endpoint. You're not necessarily always going to know what that deadline is when you get started on your creative journey, but you have to pick something eventually. This was incredibly helpful for me as I worked on draft number 106 or whatever it was. I needed to create a deadline saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to send this to you, editor, so that you can edit it by this date, and it's going to force me to finish it. Because when it comes to creative work, you can continually upgrade it and improve it and whatever it is, and it never ends, but you've got to get it out there. Give yourself a deadline and allow that deadline to serve you as you go forward in finishing the work. So take these and apply them to the gifts, skills, talents, and abilities that you have. Bring your creativity to the world. The world needs it. I will see you in the next video.